My boyfriend texted, "I'm using our vacation fund to bail my ex out of jail. You understand?" I stared at the message. Read it once, then again, then a third time. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a declaration. I was at work, sitting in front of a spreadsheet that balanced down to the last cent. My job is numbers, predictable outcomes, risk mitigation. I like things that make sense. That text didn't. Our vacation fund. The account we'd been building together. The one we'd named, joked about, talked about like it meant something. Not his money, not my money, ours. And he was telling me, not asking, that he was taking it. To bail his ex out of jail. You understand? Something clicked in my head. Quiet. Clean. Like a switch being flipped. I thought about every conversation we'd had about her. Every time I'd tried to explain why it made me uncomfortable that she was always around, always in trouble, always needing him. Every time he told me I was overreacting. Controlling. Cold. She's like family, he'd say. You don't abandon family. I hated that line, but I swallowed it, over and over, because I loved him, and because I'm not someone who fights. I plan. I typed 2 words. Family first. I hit send. His reply came almost instantly. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. You're amazing. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into our joint savings account. I looked at the balance, and then I transferred my half out. Exactly my half. Not $1 more, not $1 less. After that, I opened a new browser tab and searched for flights. I'd always wanted to go to Japan. He thought it was too far, too weird, not practical. A one-way ticket popped up, leaving Friday. I booked it. My phone started buzzing on my desk a few hours later, again and again. I didn't look at it. He thought I meant his family. What I meant was mine. For the first time in a long time, I chose myself. Before that text, before the word jail landed in my life like a dropped plate, things had looked, on paper, stable. We met 3 years ago, in the least romantic way possible. A mutual friend's game night. Too many people, not enough chairs. I remember sitting on the floor with a plastic cup of wine, laughing at something stupid, when he sat down next to me and said, "You look like someone who hates crowds as much as I do." I did, and he was right. He was charming in a contained way. Not loud, not flashy, thoughtful, observant. He listened more than he spoke, which made me feel seen. I was already established then, steady job, my own condo, routines that made my life feel grounded. He fit into that world easily, or at least I thought he did. We moved fast, but not recklessly. He started staying over more, then most nights, then all of them. Eventually, it just made sense for him to move in with me. My condo, my mortgage, my name on the deed. It wasn't a power thing, it was just a fact. We talked about the future in practical terms. Travel, stability, saving up for something big instead of bleeding money on weekends that disappeared by Monday. That's how the vacation fund was born. A joint savings account. We named it together, joked about it, sent screenshots every time the balance went up, like it was a small shared victory. The plan was simple. Hit $15,000, then decide where to go. Somewhere meaningful. Japan was my idea. He never loved it. It's far, he'd say. The food's weird. It's not really my thing. I let it go. There were other places. I set up an automatic transfer, $400 every month. Same day, same amount. He contributed when he could. Sometimes smaller deposits, sometimes larger. I never tracked it obsessively. I trusted the idea of us more than the math. What I didn't trust, what I never stopped noticing, was her. His ex. She was always there. Not physically, but close enough to feel like a third presence in the room. A name that came up too often. A story that always ended with him defending her. She's just unlucky. She has a good heart. She's like family. There was always a crisis. Always a reason he had to answer the phone. A job she lost. A roommate who screwed her over. A bill she couldn't pay. I told myself I was being insecure. That grown adults could be friends with their exes, that love meant trust. Every time I brought it up, the conversation followed the same arc. I'd say I was uncomfortable. He'd say I was overreacting. Then he'd say I was trying to control him. And I would back down. Because I loved him. Because I didn't want to be the woman who made ultimatums. Because deep down, I believed that consistency would win over chaos. We built a life that looked calm from the outside. Dinners on the couch, shared grocery lists, mornings where he kissed my forehead before leaving, evenings where I worked late and he waited. But threaded through all of it was the same background noise. Her needs, her emergencies, her pull on him. I didn't realize then that I wasn't competing with a person. I was competing with a pattern. And patterns don't change just because you love someone hard enough. The first red flag didn't arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, disguised as something reasonable. It was a phone call late at night. I was half asleep, curled toward the empty side of the bed, when his phone lit up on the nightstand. He didn't silence it, just stared at the screen for a second too long before answering. I heard her name. He stepped into the hallway, lowering his voice, but not enough. I caught fragments. Apologies. Reassurance. That familiar tone, soft, patient, protective, the one he rarely used with me when we argued. When he came back, I asked carefully, "Is everything okay?" He exhaled, rubbed his face. "She's having a rough time, again." That again mattered. "She lost her job," he continued, already defensive. "It's not her fault. Her boss was a jerk." I nodded. I always nodded first. "Okay, what does that mean for us?" He frowned, like the question itself was unfair. "Nothing. It just means I need to be there for her." That was the first time I felt the shift, the subtle repositioning of priorities. Us moved slightly to the side to make room for her. After that, the intrusions became more frequent. Texts during dinner, calls during weekends we'd planned together. He'd apologize, briefly, then step away anyway. I told myself this was temporary, that people go through phases, that compassion wasn't a threat. But then money entered the conversation. Not ours, hers. "She's behind on rent," he said one evening, scrolling through his phone. "She just needs a little help. She'll pay it back." I didn't answer right away. I watched the reflection of the TV flicker across his face. "Are you planning to lend it to her?" He looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. I already did. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing, steady and unbothered. My chest felt tight, not with jealousy, but with something colder. Expectation. He didn't ask because in his mind it wasn't up for discussion. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored before, the way he minimized her mistakes, the way he framed her problems as bad luck, never choices, the way my discomfort was always labeled as drama, while hers was always an emergency. Every conversation ended the same way. "You knew she was important to me," he'd say. "She's like family." Family. That word was doing too much work. I tried to set boundaries, carefully worded ones. I didn't want him to cut her off. I just wanted limits. "I need to feel like I come first," I said one night, my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. He laughed, not unkindly but dismissively. "You're making this bigger than it is." That was the second red flag. Not anger, not shouting. Dismissal. I began tracking things in my head. Not obsessively, just quietly. Dates. Amounts. How often her crises coincided with moments when we were supposed to be building something together. That's when I realized something unsettling. The vacation fund, the thing I believe symbolized us, had slowly become abstract to him. Just money. Flexible. Available. Where I saw structure, he saw a safety net. Not for us. For her. The seed of doubt took root then. Small, but persistent. I started asking myself questions I'd avoided for months. What would happen if she needed more? What would he expect me to give up next? And more terrifying than all of it, what if he never saw a problem at all? The day everything detonated didn't feel dramatic at first. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Predictable. I was at work, deep inside a database query, refining parameters, watching rows populate and disappear as the logic tightened. This is how my mind works. Inputs, outputs, cause and effect. If something doesn't add up, you trace it until it does. At 11:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. I glanced down. His name. I expected something routine, a question about dinner, a quick check-in. Instead, the message landed with a blunt finality. "Absolute emergency. My ex is in jail. Bail is set. I'm using our vacation fund to bail her out. You understand?" I froze. Read it once, then again, then a third time. It wasn't framed as a discussion. There was no "can we talk" or "I need your help." It was a declaration, already decided. I'm using our vacation fund. Not his money, not my money. Ours. Every deposit I'd made without fail. Every compromise I'd accepted. Every future plan quietly tied to that account. And he was telling me, not asking, that it was being spent. I stared at the blinking cursor on my monitor. Steady. Indifferent. Around me, the office continued as if nothing had happened. Someone laughed down the hall, a printer whirred. Inside me, something went still. All the conversations from the past 3 years snapped into alignment. The late-night calls, The way he minimized my discomfort. The repeated line, she's like family. They didn't feel confusing anymore. They formed a straight, undeniable line. This wasn't a sudden choice. It was the logical conclusion of every choice he'd already made. I typed slowly. Family first. 2 words. I sent them. His response came almost immediately. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. You're the best. She really needs this. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I didn't reply. Instead, I minimized my work window and logged into our joint savings account. The balance sat there calmly, 14 chud. I clicked into the transaction history. Month after month of deposits stared back at me. $400. Same date, same amount. Quiet consistency. His contributions were there too. Uneven, but real. I didn't hesitate. I transferred my exact contribution out of the account and into my personal checking. Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. I left his share untouched. Then I opened a new browser tab. Japan. I'd mentioned it for years. He always dismissed it. Too far, too strange, too impractical. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped bringing it up. A one-way flight appeared, leaving Friday. Premium economy. I booked it. After that, I emailed my boss. Short, professional, calm. A sudden family emergency. PTO already accrued. I'd handle handoffs. Different time zone. The approval came back within minutes. I put my phone on silent and went back to work. I felt nothing. No anger, no panic. Just a clean, unfamiliar quiet. Around 3:30 p.m., my phone began vibrating hard against my desk. Over and over. I didn't look. At 4:00, a voicemail notification appeared. I put in my headphones and pressed play. His voice wasn't calm anymore, but it wasn't shouting. It wasn't panic. It was tight, controlled in that brittle way men get when they're losing leverage and trying not to show it. He said he was at this bail bondsman's office. The bail was higher than expected. 10% upfront. $10,000. He'd already told them he had the money. He went to withdraw it. There was only his half left. He was short $3,000. He exhaled sharply into the phone, frustration bleeding through the pauses between his words. Her mother was crying. His ex was still in custody. Then his tone shifted, flatter, sharper. You said you understood, he said. You said family first. A brief pause. What did you do? The voicemail ended. I listened to it again. Then I took off my headphones. I had meant exactly what I'd sent. Family first. I just hadn't meant his. My flight left in 3 days. And for the first time in a long time, my life made sense. The quiet didn't last. I left work early that day, not in a rush, not panicked, just deliberate. The drive home felt oddly distant, like I was watching myself from a few feet behind the wheel. My hands were steady, my breathing was normal. That scared me more than tears would have. By the time I got home, my phone had filled itself without my participation. Missed calls, texts stacked on top of each other, a rhythm I recognized. First came confusion. Where are you? Call me back. Then accusation. What you did was messed up. That money wasn't just yours. Then escalation. You stole from me. I'm calling the police. I placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter and leaned there for a moment, palms flat against the cool stone. The condo was quiet. My condo. The place I'd bought before him, before us, before everything got blurred by compromise. I exhaled slowly. This was what reaction looked like for him. Not reflection, not apology. Control through pressure. By early evening, I knew what was coming next. He doesn't accept silence, I thought. He just gets louder. I called a locksmith. Emergency rekey, I said calmly. Someone who no longer lives here has a key. No hesitation, no follow-up questions. 45 minutes. While I waited, I started packing, not frantically, not emotionally. 1 suitcase. Essentials. Clothes for the trip. My laptop. Documents. The things I'd reach for if I had to leave my own life behind temporarily. The locksmith finished just after 6. At 6:15, I heard the key scrape against the lock. Once. Again. Harder. Then pounding. Open the door, he said through the wood. Not yelling, commanding. I know you're in there. I didn't answer. The pounding continued. 10 minutes. Then silence. My phone rang. His sister. I let it go. Then his mother. I let that go too. 30 minutes later, there was another knock. Different. Firm, official. I checked the peephole. 2 police officers. Behind them stood my boyfriend, arms crossed, jaw tight, his face flushed not with tears, but with anger held just under the skin. I opened the door. Ma'am, one of the officers said, already tired, We received a call about a domestic disturbance and a possible theft. She locked me out, my boyfriend said immediately, and she stole money from me. I kept my voice level. There's no disturbance. This is my condo. I'm the sole owner. I handed over my ID, the address matching. He was living here as my guest. She stole my money, he said again, sharper this time. I walked to the coffee table and picked up a folder I'd already prepared. Printed statements, transfer history, dates, amounts. This is our joint savings account, I said. You'll see my deposits totaling $7,200. His total contribution was $7,000. I withdrew my portion only. His is still there. The officer flipped through the pages, expression neutral. Why did you do that? He asked. I handed him my phone. Because he texted me today stating he was taking the entire balance to bail his ex out of jail. I did not authorize the use of my contribution. The officer read the text, looked at me, then at him. This is a civil matter, he said. She didn't steal anything. She took her own money. And this is her residence. But my stuff, my boyfriend started. I've packed it, I said. He can take it. The officer stayed while he gathered his things. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just moved stiffly, frustration radiating off him in tight, controlled motions. As he passed me with the box, he finally said it. You're cold, he muttered. You always were. I met his eyes for the first time that night. No, I said quietly. I'm just done funding your choices. When the door closed behind him, the silence returned. This time it felt earned. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was replaying the scene at the door, or because I missed him. I slept lightly because my mind was already moving ahead, mapping consequences the way it always did. When something collapses, I don't stand in the wreckage. I start assessing what falls next. By morning, the messages had changed tone again. The anger had burned itself out. What replaced it was something colder. Legal. You need to send the money back, he texted. This isn't over. I'm talking to someone. I didn't respond. By mid-morning, the calls started coming from numbers that weren't his. First, his sister. I let it ring. Then his mother. I made the mistake of answering that one. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse me outright. She went straight for something more insidious. Concern. Honey, she said, drawing the word out like it was meant to soothe me. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear, watching sunlight creep across the floor. There isn't, I said. She sighed softly, the way people do when they think you're being difficult on purpose. He's distraught. You know how sensitive he is. He thought you were a team. We were, I said, until he decided to spend my savings without asking. Well, she replied smoothly, that money was for emergencies. And this was an emergency. For him, not for us. She continued, her voice warming. His ex has had such a hard life. She just gets turned around sometimes. And now her mother had to scramble to cover the rest of the bail. It was humiliating for the family. The family. I closed my eyes briefly. What are you asking me to do? I said. A pause, just long enough to feel calculated. I think the right thing, the kind thing, would be for you to send back the $7,200 you took, she said. Be the bigger person. Don't let money ruin something beautiful. Money wasn't ruining anything. It was revealing it. I'm not sending it back, I said. Her tone sharpened. Then you're being petty. I'm being logical. She scoffed quietly. You always were so cold. There it was again, the word they used when control stopped working. I hung up. That afternoon, a text came from his sister, a screenshot. A small claims court filing form. You're being sued, the message read. $7,200 for the money you stole. $2,000 for property you're holding hostage. $1,000 for emotional distress. I stared at the numbers. They were padding it, inflating it, turning their outrage into a receipt. I replied with 4 words. See you in court. Then I blocked all of them. That evening, I moved methodically. I put a hold on my mail, paid my condo fees 3 months in advance, double-checked my flight confirmation. I asked a friend, someone I trusted, someone who had nothing to do with this mess, to check on the place while I was gone. I didn't feel reckless. I felt prepared. The last message slipped through before the block fully took effect. From him. You think you're so smart, he wrote. You ruined my life over money. I didn't answer. Because if anyone's life was unraveling, it wasn't mine. 2 days later, I boarded my flight. As the plane lifted off, I watched the city shrink beneath me. Streets becoming lines, buildings becoming shapes. For the first time since that text arrived, my chest loosened. Distance has a way of clarifying things. I wasn't running. I was stepping out of the blast radius. They could file papers. They could rehearse their story. They could tell each other I was heartless, greedy, cruel. I knew the truth. I had taken exactly what was mine, nothing more. And for the first time in 3 years, no one had access to my accounts, my home, or my silence unless I allowed it. At 30,000 feet, with my phone in airplane mode and my future unclaimed by anyone else's emergency, I felt something unfamiliar settle in. Relief. Relief didn't last the way I thought it would. It softened the edges, yes, but once the plane leveled out and the novelty of distance wore off, something heavier crept in. Not regret, not doubt, something quieter, lonelier. Japan was beautiful in the way things are when they don't know you. Neon bleeding into rain-slicked streets. Train stations humming with precision. Bowls of ramen steaming in small shops where no one asked personal questions. I moved through it all like a ghost with a passport. At night, in the hotel room, the silence changed texture. There was no one calling, no one knocking, no one demanding explanations. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, surveying damage you hadn't fully processed yet. I checked my phone more than I wanted to admit. Not for messages from him, I'd blocked those, but for proof that my life still existed somewhere else. Work emails, calendar reminders, anything familiar. One evening, after a long walk that left my legs aching, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally listened to the voicemails I hadn't deleted. His voice, tight, controlled, frustrated. His mother's voice, soft, disappointed, framed like concern. His sister's message, short, sharp, vindictive. Each one landed differently, now that I was far enough away to hear the pattern instead of the emotion. They weren't asking how I was. They were tallying what they'd lost. That realization hit harder than the confrontation ever had. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, hands folded over my stomach, breathing slow and shallow. For the first time since I booked the flight, a question surfaced that I hadn't allowed myself to ask. Was this all I was to them? An account balance, a safety net, a solution. I replayed moments I'd dismissed at the time, the way he'd talk about our money when it was needed, but his autonomy when it wasn't. The way my discomfort was always inconvenient, but his ex's chaos was sacred. I'd told myself love meant patience, but patience, I was realizing, had slowly turned into self-erasure. That night, I dreamed I was back in my condo, standing in the living room, surrounded by boxes that weren't mine. Every time I tried to open one, someone else stepped in front of me and said, "Later. This isn't the time. Be reasonable." I woke up with my heart racing. For the first time since this started, I cried. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just quiet tears that slipped into my hairline and soaked the pillow. Not for him, not even for the relationship. I cried for the version of myself who kept making space, believing that if she were just a little more understanding, things would even out. They never had. The next day, I wandered without a plan. Let myself get lost. Sat in a park and watched a woman teach her child how to ride a bike, hands hovering just inches from the seat, ready to catch but not interfering. That image stayed with me. Support doesn't mean control. Care doesn't mean sacrifice without consent. By the time I returned to the hotel that night, the sadness had shifted. It hadn't disappeared, but it had clarified. I wasn't mourning the loss of him. I was mourning the illusion that if I gave enough, I'd eventually be chosen. I opened my laptop and began organizing my documents. Bank statements, screenshots, messages, everything I'd instinctively saved without fully acknowledging why. Preparation isn't fear, I reminded myself. It's self-respect. The dark moment wasn't the night I cried. It was the moment I understood how close I'd come to mistaking endurance for love. And once I saw that clearly, there was no unseeing it. The turning point didn't arrive as a dramatic confrontation or a single triumphant line. It arrived as paperwork. I was still in Japan when the official notice came through, scanned and forwarded by a friend who'd been checking my mail. A small claims summons, names listed neatly at the top. His mother's, his sister's. They were suing me. $7,200 for the money I stole. $2,000 for a painting I was supposedly holding hostage. Another amount for emotional distress and moving costs. I stared at the document for a long moment, then felt something settle into place. So this was the route they'd chosen. Not accountability, not reflection. Escalation. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I booked a return flight for when my PTO ended and spent the rest of my time preparing, not obsessively, just methodically. I requested certified statements from the bank, downloaded transaction histories, saved screenshots of his text message, the one that started all of this. I'm using our vacation fund. I labeled folders, printed copies, organized everything the way I always did when faced with a problem that refused to resolve itself emotionally. When I got back, the condo felt different, not empty, clear. I unpacked slowly, rehung a painting that had been taken down in the chaos, and set my binder on the dining table. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I arrived early, dressed simply, professionally, not to impress anyone, just to look like myself, prepared, grounded. They arrived together. He didn't look at me. His mother hovered close, whispering. His sister scanned the room like she was waiting for an audience. His ex was notably absent. When our case was called, we stepped forward. He spoke first. He said we'd been engaged, that I'd acted maliciously, that I'd taken money that wasn't mine, that I'd humiliated him and abandoned him in a moment of crisis. He spoke confidently, like someone used to being believed. Then it was my turn. I opened my binder. Your Honor, I said calmly, we were not engaged. This is the deed to my condo, purchased before the relationship, in my name only. I passed it forward. Here is the certified statement from our joint savings account. You'll see my total contribution was $7,200. His contribution was $7,000. I turned the page. This is the transfer showing I withdrew my contribution only. I left his money untouched. Another page. And this, I said, holding up my phone, is the text message he sent me informing, not asking, that he was taking the entire balance to bail his ex out of jail. The judge read it. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just slightly. Enough. And the painting? She asked. I slid forward a notarized affidavit, a letter, a photo. It was a personal gift to me from his grandmother for my birthday, I said. Here's the card, and here's the photo of us holding it. Silence filled the room. Then I added the final piece. I was also told his ex was arrested for a bar fight. That was not accurate. I handed over a printout. Public records show she was arrested for check fraud. She pled guilty last month and was sentenced. The judge leaned back, looked at him, then at his mother, then at me. So, she said slowly, you attempted to take your girlfriend's savings to bail out another woman you were involved with. When she took her own money, you sued her. He opened his mouth. She raised a hand. Case dismissed, she said, with prejudice. Her tone sharpened. I suggest you all take responsibility for your choices and stop wasting this court's time. That was it. No gavel slam, no dramatic pause. Just clarity. As I packed my binder, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge. Relief. Outside the courtroom, his sister tried to corner me. Accusations, insults, blame. I looked at her once. No, I said. The trade just finished going through. Then I walked away. The turning point wasn't winning. It was realizing I'd never been powerless. I'd just been patient. And patience finally had reached its limit. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments, through other people's voices, secondhand updates, and the quiet consequences that followed them long after the courtroom emptied. I didn't stay to watch them process the ruling. I didn't need to. The decision had already done its work. It stripped away the story they'd built, the one where I was cold, cruel, calculating, and left only the facts standing. When I got home, I placed my keys on the counter and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, not the heavy kind from before. This one felt settled, finished. Over the next few weeks, news filtered in. A mutual friend told me his mother was furious, not at him, but at his ex. Furious that she'd lied about the arrest. Furious that she'd let the situation spiral publicly. Furious that her wedding ring, the one she'd pawned to cover the missing bail money, hadn't even been enough to buy loyalty. Apparently, the ring became a symbol in their house. Past blame, resentment, a constant reminder of who had lost what. His sister stopped posting vague threats online and pivoted to something quieter. Bitterness disguised as jokes. Screenshots, subtle digs. Nothing actionable, just noise. He tried once. A single email. No subject line. I didn't think it would go this far. I read it twice, then archived it. Because it had gone that far long before court. Before texts, before locks, before flights. It had gone that far the moment he decided my consent was optional. Another update came through a week later. He'd lost his job. Not because of me, not because of the lawsuit. Because according to someone who worked with him, he'd become unreliable, missed deadlines, took long personal calls, let chaos spill into places that demanded structure. The same pattern I'd lived with, just now visible to people who didn't love him enough to excuse it. He moved into an apartment with his ex. His name was on the lease. Hers wasn't. She still wasn't paying rent. That part almost made me laugh. Not out loud, just a brief, disbelieving exhale. Some stories repeat themselves whether you stay to watch or not. I rearranged my condo. Not dramatically, just enough to make it mine again. I moved furniture back where I liked it, cleared a shelf that had held his things, hung the painting, in my bedroom, where morning light caught it first. It felt right there. Work settled back into rhythm. Clean spreadsheets, predictable outcomes. My boss was glad I was back. I took on a new project, something that required focus, precision, and no emotional negotiation. At night, I noticed the absence of tension. No waiting for footsteps, no bracing for arguments, no calculating how much understanding I had left to give. Freedom didn't feel like celebration. It felt like space. The last update came from the friend who'd been watering my plants while I was gone. He hesitated before telling me. Apparently, things between his mother and his ex's mother had imploded. Accusations, debts, who owed whom, who had enabled what, who had ruined whose life. Everyone wanted restitution. No one wanted responsibility. I listened quietly, then thanked him and changed the subject. Because none of it belonged to me anymore. The fallout wasn't loud. It was structural. Lives rearranged around consequences. Relationships recalibrated without my involvement. A system collapsing under the weight of choices I no longer cushioned. That was the real ending for them. For me, it was simpler. I woke up one morning, looked at the painting on my wall, and realized I hadn't checked my phone out of habit in days. No dread, no vigilance, just quiet. And that was enough. The ending didn't feel triumphant. There was no moment where everything suddenly felt happy, no instant glow of victory or relief. What I felt instead was something steadier, quieter, like standing on solid ground after years of compensating for someone else's imbalance. Life didn't transform overnight. It simplified. I went back to work. I cooked for myself again. I slept through the night without waking to check my phone. The condo stopped feeling like a place I had to defend and started feeling like a home again. I kept the painting in my bedroom. Not as a trophy, not as proof that I'd won something, but as a reminder of a boundary I hadn't known how to draw before. Gifts given freely aren't meant to be leveraged. Love offered sincerely isn't meant to be cashed out during emergencies that were never yours to fix. I thought about how easily I'd confused patience with virtue. How often women are taught that endurance is the same as love, that being understanding means staying quiet when something feels wrong. That compromise means shrinking yourself until the relationship fits comfortably around everyone else. It doesn't. Real partnership doesn't require you to underwrite chaos. Real care doesn't come with ultimatums disguised as emergencies. And family, real family, doesn't demand silence in exchange for belonging. I didn't leave because of money. I left because consent was treated as optional. Because my boundaries were labeled cruelty. Because my stability was seen as a resource, not a value. And because, at some point, I realized that staying would mean teaching myself to disappear a little more each time. Now my accounts are mine. My home is mine. My time belongs to me again. I'm planning another trip, somewhere closer this time, round trip. No escape necessary. I don't feel angry. I don't feel vindictive. I feel free. And if there's a lesson in all of this, it's a simple one. If someone tells you who they're willing to sacrifice when things get hard, believe them. Then choose yourself, every time. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me through this story. Not because it was dramatic, not because it had a courtroom ending, but because it touched something familiar. Many of us don't leave relationships when the first red flag appears. We leave when the pattern becomes undeniable, when love starts demanding silence, when compromise quietly turns into self-erasure. If you've ever been told you were cold for protecting yourself, selfish for saying no, or heartless for refusing to bankroll someone else's chaos, you're not alone. Choosing yourself doesn't make you cruel, it makes you honest. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments, whether you stayed, whether you left, or whether you're still deciding. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story right now, please share it with them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real stories about boundaries, betrayal, and choosing yourself when it matters most. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself.